Welcome back to the After Hours podcast. I'm Matthew Timler, CEO and owner of Plug Light Bulb Electrical Services, and this is
Tanner Thorne, a VP of Sales at Plug Light Bulb Electrical Services.
So today we're going to cover a variety of topics, but for starters, Tanner, you've been in a lot of industries. You've been at the pinnacle of a lot of industries. You've been highly involved in a lot of industries. How'd you get here?
Short answer, you, to be honest with you. No, I've just been very blessed to be around a lot of different folks and have a lot of different conversations. And the old proverb of it's not what you know, but really who you know and how you can help has played a huge role in finding my success. I mean, I've been part of mom and pop shops all the way up to multi-billion-dollar companies and honestly everywhere in between. And everyone has had its own learning curves and failures, mistakes, but a lot of growth always to improve.
Yeah.
So
It's been a blessing and a curse to have you on the team. But what I mean by that is you're very driven, you're super motivated, and I enjoy having somebody also hold me accountable. So it's appreciated. So we've been doing a lot in the solar industry, the EV side of things. We're going to touch on the EV side of things a little bit right now. Can you dive into that? Like, you had zero experience, well, maybe little experience coming to PLB, and you've immersed yourself into the EV world, and you've actually got us contracts with exclusivity. And how'd you do that?
honestly, to first part of your answer, it was just on a lot of studying to understand the product, where it's going, the trends, where it is now, to be able to kind of walk the walk and speak the speak, if you will. From there, it was just being personable and relationship built. That's kind of what's kept me in sales since I was a teenager, was just the fact that it's not necessarily always the product, but who it is behind the product and how you take care of the customer afterwards. And when we talk about exclusivity for contracts, especially when it's pilot programs such as Tesla's Cybertrucks, they brought up the fact of wanting to have oversight and control, and they didn't want to release it to the wild, but they wanted to partner with folks that they could feel they could trust and were super hyper communicative. So they could get feedback to make it easier for installations, but also take care of their customers because it was brand new technology to them. Which just led to a lot of conversations with utility companies who didn't understand how it was supposed to work. If you look at just the state of Wisconsin, I think we have over 70 utility companies at this point in time, from the massive conglomerates of WPS to We Energies to the smaller ones of like Eau Claire and New Richmond utilities that we've worked with for some of these installs. And throughout that process, it's just been building those relationships and taking care of folks along the way, and not being rude or crude about it, but saying, hey, we're all learning together. And that community relationship has gone a long way into just seeing who we are and what we're about and why we're so driven to innovate, but also not lose sight of who we are as a standpoint.
Yeah, the Cybertrucks were an awesome learning experience. We did a lot of figuring out together on a lot of those installs.
100%.
There was a lot of educating to the utility companies and Tesla themselves. So
Absolutely.
And it was honestly super impressive to watch you kind of take control of those situations and be able to learn at a level that you get to go have those informed conversations with some of the engineers and be like, hey, this is Wisconsin state code. We can't be doing this here. And like, I was super impressed, and I appreciated that I didn't need to be involved at every single angle. So that was super cool. Now, you're working on other things in the EV side and industry. Like, where do you see all of this going? Not just at PLB, but like, where do you see EV going to?
I don't foresee EV going away, and the reason why is because there's so much investment dollars in it to make it work. And you have federal grant money, you have private investor money, you have folks who are just coming out of the woodwork to get any slice of the pie that they can. It's almost like what do you want to call it? The gold rush from back in the day. Because it's still new, it's still being innovated at a hyper speed exponentially, because It's who's next. You have the Elon Musk of the world who really threw a lot of dollars at it to get it going. And now you have other manufacturers like Ford, GM. One of the new players on the block is Rivian, that is crushing their own company goals above and beyond with how they're approaching the EV world. But then you have programs like the NEVI, which is the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Act, which is backed by federal dollars and being handed down to the states to come up with their own game plan. So, beginning of this year, in January, Wisconsin released their WEVI program, which made a lot of news outlets coverages for the day with the fact that Quick Trip was scrutinized for getting a large sum of it for as many stations as they had. But it also goes to show that Quick Trip, for as much as we love them and we see them on social media, they still want to be pioneers. They see it. They're willing to invest the dollars in it as a huge company. And when you see that happening in a lot of different areas and you just watch, I think that's one of the favorite things I like to do is just watch to see who's doing what at any given point in time, because those are key indicators of people don't like to lose money. It's one thing I've learned over time. They like to invest in things that aren't going away. And when we talk about what I think this is going to do to the market is it's hard to really forecast because you still have to have adoption of EVs. You see it on news all the time, or people are talking about it. And even here in Green Bay, you see the Cybertrucks, and people come up and ask me, "Hey, I know you guys are doing the Cybertruck installations. They're kind of ugly." Is a lot of the comments I get all the time, and you're seeing a lot of them get wrapped in like B-52 bomber skins or even Halo Warthog truck skins.
Yeah.
So it's fun to see the creative nature that these owners have of them, but then it's what's next. And that's the fascinating part of this industry, especially EVs, is that question continually gets asked. And I don't know how much you've heard in the EV space when it comes to those situations, but batteries are changing. The way that vehicles are being built in general are changing because of the nature of EVs. And then you look at our side in the electrical world and go where most people don't go. And we look at the power lines that are running down the sides of the street, and you get some educated folks in a room and you start talking about stressing out the grid. And can you touch on what that means to stress out the grid for people who are listening to us? That's kind of your expertise.
So, like what Tanner's referencing right now is our infrastructure. After we hit the 30% like capacity of like EVs that they're really trying to push for, it can't handle it. So like the power companies right now are really trying to push for microgrids, like your little mom and pops trying to actually push power back on the line, offset their cost, plus push additional power onto the line. But and don't quote me on this is like in a rough amount of time, but like the copper ore mines right now are running at 50% quality ore. So they used to be 100% ore, and now they're down to 50%. And if we don't do anything like within the mining industry as it sits right now and find better ore, it's going to take us 350 years just to build the copper infrastructure for these EV chargers. And that's copper. Copper is the like higher quality of the materials used for wire, and aluminum's an even further gap. It's almost like 1,000 years at this point. Lithium, I think, was like 10,000 year gap. It's just crazy, these gaps of if we wanted to be 100% EV, what we would have to be doing on all these different fronts. So I think EV is just like you, it's not going away. But what I'm curious to see is like how the government's going to end up handling this. Like we're going to have, I know Tesla, it seems like Tesla is so innovative with their Cybertrucks that like they've already incorporated their systems to be talking to the grid to be able to help in brownouts and blackouts. And so when is the government going to start doing that too? Like when is the WPSs or the We Energies of the world going to start talking with each other, getting people to go towards battery banks, because like we see where the grid is headed and it can only handle so much. And not to mention data centers are starting to pop up and they're applying stress on the grid. So overall, like it definitely can't handle it. And I don't think I have a solid a solid option besides like more people are going to have to just get renewable energy, and they're going to have to be providing some level of power themselves, especially in large cities if they don't want to have blips. Like if you live in California or New York, like you're screwed. The 2035 rolls around, you better be on renewable energy or you are not going to be able to handle like there's going to be brownouts, blackouts happening all of the time. And especially since they're shutting down the means of coal plants, like they need renewable energy. So I would say like with the EV thing, I agree with you. I don't think it's going away. There's too many dollars spent. Like GM and Ford have spent so much money on it that there's no going back now. Like and there's too many vehicles out there. Yeah. So where is that line? Because I don't know. I don't think that we're going to make 2035 happen and get rid of all the gas vehicles just based on our infrastructures. But where's the line?
I think it's hard to draw the line because Wisconsin historically is not a early pioneer.
No.
We are very much, especially in Northeast Wisconsin and the Northwoods, almost worlds apart from the Milwaukees and Madisons of the world, where it's like, yeah, bring me on the new stuff. You have such a young population craving that technology. From what I've seen over the years, they'll grab it and they'll gravitate, and then they'll grow with it. And we still get phone calls as a company about people wanting to put in louder generators when we could talk about battery banks that last just as long and require no means of service. But that's the cultural tug that we're dealing with in this realm. And when you just look at the infrastructure that's out there, Wisconsin right now, from Wisconsin DOT registrations, because those are a wonderful thing to look at, we're not even to 20,000 registered EVs in the state. And by registered EVs, that also includes hybrids in that, hybrids have been around for a long time, which is just the mixture of fossil fuels with EV. And they're predicting, and of course, as good as you can predict, that by 2030, we're going to be at about 250,000 EVs on the road, which then just ramps up. And they're predicting by 2050, I think was the metric, we're going to be at about 1.8 million for just the state of Wisconsin. And Wisconsin's population historically has always been between 4 to 5 million. So that's a large chunk of our home state's population of EVs on the road. Yeah. So you look at just the requirement for charging capacity when people go home at night, and you look at just the curve of energy consumption when all of us are at work during the day. Most of our homes, like right now, I have no lights on in my house. I have heat on a little bit. We're just in that mixed season of, do I need AC or do I need the furnace today? And when everybody goes home, typically between your 3:30 to 5 o'clock, your kids' iPads, the phones, the TVs, the lights, the cookware, the vehicles are plugged in if there's EVs in there. And then you just multiply that across the community. That's a large draw. So what utility companies are starting to do is they're incentivizing folks to say, hey, we want to be able to tap into when you're using these EVs, which is becoming part of our permitting process, to let them know, hey, this house has an EV. And they're working on communicating to say, hey, can we charge your vehicle when you're sleeping, when the rest of the community is powering down, so it doesn't put as much stress onto the grid as what they're working towards. And California is getting very good at doing that, because you see the huge ramp up, and they're trying to minimize and plateau, if not slightly bring it down, so you don't have those rolling brownouts or those the critical blackouts that you see on the marketplace. And that just leads into, what are people really using the EVs for? Do they need to be plugged in all the time? Or are you just using them to commute to work? Last year, we saw the wonderful levels of EV chargers, which we can touch on in a little bit. But you saw in the news how some of the blizzards were just causing EVs to get parked in Chicago. And people were using the terminology and the stigma of, oh, they're just battery warmers at this point because it's too cold out. But there's scientific data that goes behind it from level ones, which in my opinion are very close to just battery warmers, or a trickle charge, as our forefathers would call it. Level twos have become very popular, and that's what you see in residential homes and also on the commercial side. And then you have level threes, which are your DC fast charges, which in and of themselves are animals for when it comes to installs and the power draw that they need to rapid charge to get people on the road, which it comes from the NEVI, because people were complaining for years now of wanting to be able to go across country, and they couldn't, because you couldn't go to the North Dakotas or the South Dakotas and find a place to charge. And that was almost your dead zone, if you will. So That's what I see a lot in the EV world, and that's why the infrastructure needs to be there. What the states that are throwing the dollars at it are the ones who are trying to draw that demographic to the state and trying to find ways to trickle it into other things. As far as some folks are using it for recruitment tactics, residential homes are using it as selling tactics when they're either buying or selling and putting it into their bids. So that's kind of what the thought process is so far and what I'm seeing from EVs.
So we have a lot of electricians, and I know like when we're going through all of the loopholes to do the EV installs, they have to go through all the trainings. For the other electricians out there, they're like, hey, I don't know much about EVs. I want to know more about EVs. Like, what do you think the best realm of education on it is? Or like, what do you think there is that they need to know about it?
I think that's a two-part question. If you look at specifically the residential side, you can Google search good installs and bad installs very quickly. And my thought process is I prefer the hardwired method of going from either your main panel or your sub panel to the charger because you have less connection points. You have a lot of voltage running through those pieces of equipment that is a lot different than sticking a fork in a normal outlet. And that's where some folks sometimes get lost and they want to DIY it. And there can be catastrophic consequences to that. I mean, you and I have even talked about touching electric fences, and it becomes very hard to pull away depending on what's going through there.
Yeah.
And I would say ask. I mean, this is in very innovative field, and it's different than 30, even 40 years ago when it was very routine. You have new technology that's coming out all the time that's requiring different codes, different knowledge. And I think that's why continuing education is such a huge thing. And I'm a firm believer in playing nice in the sandbox just for safety.
Yeah.
I'm not going to ever tell another electrician who's not part of our company, no, I'm not going to help you go figure out how to do that EV charger by yourself. And then I see him in the news the next day when I could have helped.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what really sets us apart is we want not only our team to be safe, but also the end user and anyone else who's going into there to do it and do it right. And you're talking about what your typical home for their outlets is 10 to 20 amps for their breaker, and most of these chargers for charging capacity are pushing 60 amps, if not more. I mean, the Ford Lightning they ask for a 100 amp breaker if you want to use it, which is an astronomical of juice, as they like to put it in the civilian world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's the residential side. Is there anything that you think that electricians should know? I mean, you're a master electrician yourself over there.
I think a very simplistic thing that all of us electricians, like, we have a lot of pride and ego that goes in with it. Just read the directions. Like, they tell you to use copper wiring. I've gone and I've seen people install aluminum wiring, and then it's just melted and the whole device is shot. Like, I've seen them use fork crimps, and it like specifically tells you don't use this type of crimping method in there. Like, just read the directions. I think it's something so simple. And like, I've had homeowners look at me and say, why are you reading the directions? And I'm like, because everyone's a little bit different. Well, aren't they all the same? Yeah, the breaker and the wire getting into them are the same, but overall the install might be a little bit different. Like, even Tesla over time, like, you've watched it, they have had so many different generations of chargers that go 100%. From I have to set the little dials inside of the monitor to I need to put on the screen what the breaker ampacity is to now I need to download a Wi-Fi app and I need to hand it off to the customer in a different app, and everything needs to be integrated. So they all are a little bit different, and just don't be too proud to just read the dang directions. Like,
and if you don't know, it's okay.
Yeah.
Just have someone on speed dial who you can lean on. I mean, even you and I have had that on some homes that we've done the power shares for, where we've had to go back through, even with it, we've done over 24 at this point now, and find the hard triggers, and they're the tiniest minute things, and having to walk homeowners through it and make sure that they're safe while doing it is very anxiety ridden. And I think that's something that, circling back on one of your earlier questions, is absolutely terrifying for me at the beginning of just going through this and not truly knowing. And that's always been a fear of mine is sounding green or being green. And that's what drives me sometimes to do as much knowledge and research so I can stay on par with guys like you in this world because it's going so fast. And from just our conversations and having external conversations with folks who have decades more experience in the electrical field than I do, who have no idea what I'm talking about, it's just mind blowing to me when we have those conversations. And then they're asking me, what do you know? It's like, honestly, all I did was read the 250 some odd page manual and then
Yep.
ask a lot of really good questions afterwards to make sure we're doing it right.
Yep.
And I think that's the commonality that we have between you and I is just doing it right, even if sometimes it doesn't mean doing it the quickest, because that's a livelihood. I mean, I've seen stories that we've even shared of Randall Cobb's family who had that electrical fire in their home because a electric vehicle charger was installed improperly. And I never want any of our clients to have to go through that.
No.
If I can absolutely help it, and if it's not a us problem or something that we did, is it a manufacturing issue that we can help adjust? Because that's just who we are, down to our core.
Yeah. So, with the industry growing and developing so much, like what sort of opportunities do you think there is for other electricians now? Like,
I think you're having a niching happening. You're having electrical companies who are being told to either get on the bandwagon or stay where you're at. And that is a hard pill to swallow for the pride and the ego factor for an electrician to say, I don't know. And I don't know enough to not touch this realm. You're having electricians who are so accustomed to doing like residential new builds or service work, or now we're being asked to do designing and a lot more load calculations to make sure that we're working with the utility company almost as an electrical engineer to make sure that they have the proper voltage coming in. I mean, I'm doing that for a commercial EV situation down in Waukesha where the guy wants everything in the sun, but can the utility company provide it without astronomically raising the install price to make it ROI for him, for his bank, and get his return, but also he just wants to help. So you're having a lot more involvement from a lot of different entities to get these projects done now more than ever. And that is the hard pill to swallow because it slows down. Because now you're leaning on not only us as electricians, you're leaning on the customer, you're leaning on maybe a landowner who's renting it, you're leaning on a utility company, and heaven forbid you have any other contractors who need to get in, like your concrete workers or a GC or a plumber or an HVAC guy to get something done. So you have a lot more cooks in the kitchen, and you're having a lot more relinquishing of control, which is what leads to sometimes not playing nice in the sandbox with other subs, even though you want to, because everybody's trying to get done, because everybody wants to get paid, everybody wants to grow, and they want to go on to the next project.
yeah.
And I don't think that struggle's ever stopped. And one thing we need to keep in mind is our code changes quite often. I mean, Wisconsin's still in the 2017 NEC code. You have the plumbing industry, and correct me if I'm wrong, their code hasn't changed for 30-ish years.
I actually don't know for sure, but I know the building code, we're still in the 2011.
So you have a lot of discrepancy between codes that one may ask one thing and the other one may not. And well, now what do you do on the job site?
Yeah.
Because you're still trying to get to that ultimate end goal. And you bring in the electricians who aren't used to that, or they're getting involved with something because they put it on a bid because they want to be that end all be all. And that's a dangerous situation if you haven't done the research or it's something you're trying to break into because you want to make extra dollars. And I think getting lost in those weeds can be really hard. And I think you can speak to that more from the bid standpoint of how many bids are we even seeing now that are asking for EVs just because it's here, or even wrapping it into batteries or solar
Yeah.
and what all that means.
Yeah. I mean, I think anything that has anything to do with a residential dwelling and even some multi-use commercial properties are all getting EV at some level, whether it be 2 to 8 to 10. And I think on top of everything you said, there's so much opening for electricians to be more than electricians now. Like they have to learn how to integrate systems together. So you have to figure out some level of programming, and some of them need to go to school for learning the computer languages. Like you have to figure out how to integrate a POS system with a different POS system, which is point of sale system. And like there's so many different options out there because people do want an ROI or return on investment on all of their products. And if they've found out that they can do it through EV, but it doesn't integrate with their point of sale system, now they're trying to have us figure out ways to make it integrate with the point of sale system. And we have been able to get things done that way. But like other electricians, you see it in the industry where they just say, no, that's not possible. Or like, oh, we don't know how to do that. And I think it really is opening a lot of doors for people to be well-rounded outside of just being an electrician. They're having to learn a lot of different skill sets, not just installing wire anymore, not just terminating things anymore, not just sizing wires, not just knowing the code. Like now AI integration with like robotics, like those robots that are making the EV, like all of the electrical industry is just growing vastly and every day. Like you had just said, there's people in the industry looking to you for advice that have been in the industry for 20 years. And that in itself says how fast it's changing and not staying on top of it. So I think like you've hit a lot of really, really good points overall on it. And I really feel like the industry is not going anywhere. We both know that. We both feel that way. And I think there's a lot of room for opportunity for anybody who's getting into the electrical field. It's just growing. It's developing. Like, I think it'd be the coolest thing if we get to like go to a Tesla plant and like get to build these things too. But, or even a GM plant, any EV plant. I think it'd just be cool. But overall, like, the industry is headed towards a very cool direction that none of us know where it's going to land, but we do see the progression. I don't think it's ever going to stop. And I want to thank you for coming here and showing people that like in a short amount of time, you can become an industry expert in a field. Tanner's only been studying EV for a year.
Yeah, just about.
So people that have been in this trade for 20 years are looking to this guy for advice. Anybody can accomplish anything in a certain period of time if you apply yourself. And I want to thank you for coming on here and regurgitating a bunch of stuff that you know about it. And you've even educated me on some of the statistics that you've thrown out there that I know you do a lot of research, and I don't try to do all of the research that you do because you have been empowered to be able to take care of that EV side of things. So,
no, 100%. Yeah. And I'm gonna be honest, it's been a heck of a year, and I appreciate it so far. And I'm excited to see where we go. But also, it's not just always about the work side. Like the wife has understood what it's like to put in the research, the time, the effort, the energy. Because if you don't have that support system at home too, to say, hey, I want to do this, and this is something I'm passionate about, and it's fun to see where it's going because it's the variety, and that's my shout out for the wifey. Because otherwise, if it was just 8 to 5, punch in, punch out, I would probably wouldn't be where I'm at as far as knowledge basis goes. Because sometimes the best work is done when everybody else is sleeping.
I hear you on that, brother. And I have to say the exact same thing about my wife. She has a lot of patience, more patience than any human being that I've met that has come in contact with me, because we all know I'm a lot to handle at times. So, yeah. But thank you. No, and I think we've been super informative, and I really feel like people can learn a lot from what we just talked about.
100%. And only keep getting better and better. So appreciate it. Till next time.
Yeah. Till next time.